Hello, dear students. Welcome to part 2 of Regulation and Coordination of Plants and Animals. In this video, we will focus on animal nervous system. The animal nervous system is one of the two primary communication and control systems in the body, consisting of a network of specialized cells called neurons that transmit signals along dedicated pathways. Its fundamental role is to enable an animal to respond to environmental stimuli by linking sensory receptors, which detect changes, to motor effectors, which execute a response. This diagram illustrates the functional pathway of the nervous system, showing how it bridges the gap between detecting a stimulus and performing an action. The process begins when sensory receptors, specialized structures that detect specific environmental changes, respond to a stimulus. For example, mechanoreceptors detect touch, while chemoreceptors detect smells or tastes. Once activated, these receptors transmit information along sensory neurons, axons, toward a processing center. In this stage, the brain receives the incoming sensory information. Integration involves decoding and processing these signals to determine the appropriate reaction. Once the processing is complete, the nervous system generates a response. Motor commands travel along specific neuronal paths to motor effectors, which are either muscles or glands. Muscles contract to create physical activity, such as locomotion or biting down on food. Glands release secretions as a response to the stimulus. The transition from a hydra to a leech illustrates a significant evolutionary shift in how animals process information and coordinate their bodies. Cephalization is an evolutionary trend found in animals with elongated, bilaterally symmetrical bodies. It involves the clustering of sensory neurons and interneurons at the anterior, front end of the body. The hydra, a cnidarian, represents the simplest form of animal nervous system organization. It possesses a diffuse nerve net with no central processing center or cluster of neurons at one end. Unlike the hydra, the planarian exhibits clear cephalization with a simple brain and eye spots located at its front end, along with longitudinal nerve cords. By the time we reach the leech, an annelid, the nervous system has become much more specialized. The leech has a distinct brain located at its anterior end to integrate sensory information. Like the leech, the insect exhibits cephalization with a nervous system organized to support active movement and sensory processing. The salamander possesses the hallmark nervous system of all vertebrates, which is characterized by a higher degree of specialization. This progression from a diffuse net to a centralized brain reflects an animal's transition toward a more active lifestyle, where having sensory organs and a processing center at the front is highly advantageous for navigating the environment. The diagram of the three types of neurons illustrates the functional organization of the nervous system, specifically how information flows between the peripheral nervous system, PNS, and the central nervous system, CNS. Located in the PNS, sensory neurons are responsible for carrying information about the environment from sensory receptors toward the CNS. The diagram shows them detecting a stimulus, like touch, and conducting that signal toward the processing center. Interneurons are the primary components of the CNS, which includes the brain and spinal cord. Their role is to provide essential links between sensory and motor neurons, processing and integrating the incoming information. Also part of the PNS, motor neurons carry impulses or commands away from the CNS to effectors, such as muscles and glands. In the diagram, a motor neuron is shown transmitting a signal to a skeletal muscle to trigger a physical response. The vertebrate nervous system is a highly specialized network, organized into a clear structural and functional hierarchy to process information and coordinate the body's activities. The system is divided into two primary parts. First, the central nervous system, CNS, consists of the brain and spinal cord. It serves as the primary center for integration and information processing. Second, the peripheral nervous system, PNS, includes cranial nerves, spinal nerves, and ganglia. The PNS is further organized based on the direction and destination of its signals. Afferent neurons carry signals from sensory receptors, detecting internal and external stimuli toward the CNS. Efferent neurons carry commands away from the CNS to various parts of the body, divided into two systems. The motor system is responsible for the control of skeletal muscles, while the autonomic nervous system manages involuntary functions by controlling smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and glands. It is further subdivided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. The sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions are the two main branches of the autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for the involuntary regulation of smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and glands. The sympathetic division is often associated with the fight-or-flight response, a rapid reaction to stress. When activated, it coordinates body-wide activities to prepare an animal for action. For example, it can trigger the release of hormones like epinephrine, which increases metabolic activity and heart rate to help an animal face or flee from a threat. The parasympathetic division generally acts in opposition to the sympathetic division to maintain homeostasis. It is typically associated with rest and digest functions, calming the body and returning systems to their normal state after a stressor has passed. The vertebrate brain is organized into 3 functional regions, each with specialized roles. The forebrain contains the olfactory bulb and the cerebrum. It is the center for complex processing, learning, regulation of sleep, and the processing of smells, or olfactory input. The midbrain is located centrally. It acts as a coordinator for routing sensory input to the appropriate areas of the brain for further processing. The hindbrain includes the cerebellum, which coordinates motor activities like locomotion. It also manages essential involuntary functions, such as blood circulation. The primary evolutionary trend in the vertebrate brain is a shift toward increasing complexity, specifically within the cerebrum, part of the forebrain, and the cerebellum, part of the hindbrain. While ancestral vertebrates like lampreys have relatively simple linear brain structures, higher vertebrates, particularly mammals, show a massive expansion of the forebrain to handle more sophisticated information processing. The human cerebral cortex is divided into 4 primary lobes, each of which has specialized functional areas for processing different types of information. The frontal lobe region is central to high-level functions, including decision-making, planning, and the control of skeletal muscles through the motor cortex. It also contains Broca's area, which is essential for the formation of speech. The parietal lobe manages the sense of touch via the somatosensory cortex. It also includes the sensory association cortex, which integrates different types of sensory information. The temporal lobe is responsible for hearing through the auditory cortex. It also houses Wernicke's area, which is dedicated to the comprehension of language. The occipital lobe is the primary center for vision. It contains the visual cortex for processing visual stimuli and pattern recognition, as well as the visual association cortex for combining images and recognizing objects. The functional areas within these lobes can be visualized using positron emission tomography, PET scans. These scans create pictures of the brain at work by detecting the magnitude of blood flow to specific regions. When a part of the brain becomes more active during a task, such as hearing, seeing, speaking, or thinking, more blood flows to that area, causing it to light up on the scan. A section through the human brain reveals a highly regionalized and complex structure. When looking at a sagittal section, a view through the middle of the human brain, several key structures associated with the endocrine system are visible. The hypothalamus sits at the base of the brain and plays a vital role in regulating the pituitary gland by releasing and inhibiting hormones. Often called the master gland, the pituitary gland is divided into the anterior and posterior pituitary, releasing various hormones like growth hormone and oxytocin that circulate throughout the body. Located deep within the brain, the pineal gland secretes melatonin, which participates in the regulation of biological rhythms, or the sleep-wake cycle. The diagram details a 3-step functional pathway that links environmental stimuli to physical actions in animals. The process begins with sensory receptors, such as mechanoreceptors for touch, chemoreceptors for taste and smell, and thermoreceptors for temperature, responding to specific stimuli. These receptors convert the stimuli into sensory information, which are transmitted along sensory nerves toward a processing center. For example, a star-nosed mole's nose contains touch receptors that activate upon contact with an object. In this stage, the central nervous system, CNS, typically the brain, serves as the processing center. Here, circuits of neurons decode and integrate the incoming sensory information to determine an appropriate reaction. In the case of the star-nosed mole, the brain processes the touch input to decide if the object encountered is food or just an obstacle. Once a decision is made, the nervous system generates motor commands and sends them along specific neuronal paths to motor effectors. The final result of this entire chain is a behavior, which is an action carried out by muscles under the direct control of the nervous system. Let us look at more examples on how animals interact with their environment. The lateral line system is a specialized sensory arrangement in fish that consists of organs stretching from the head to the tail along each side of the body. This system is crucial for a fish's survival as it allows them to monitor water currents, detect pressure waves produced by moving objects, and perceive low-frequency sounds in the water. This process is a clear example of the sensory input step we discussed earlier, where a physical stimulus, water pressure, is translated into a neural signal that the animal's nervous system can integrate and act upon. Chemoreceptors are specialized sensory receptors that detect chemical stimuli from the environment, such as solutes, tastes, and smells. Insects such as Asian army ants use their antennae to follow pheromone-marked trails, which are chemical signals left by other ants to guide the colony to new nest sites. The male silkworm, Bombyx mori, is a classic example of extreme chemosensory specialization. Their large, feathery antennae are covered in thousands of chemoreceptors specifically tuned to detect bombycol, a sex pheromone released by female silkworms. A statocyst is a fluid-filled sac containing a dense granule called a statolith and lined with sensory hair cells, mechanoreceptors. When the animal changes its orientation, gravity causes the statolith to move and press against different hair cells, sending signals to the brain that help the animal maintain equilibrium. Animals use specialized organs to sense non-visual environmental cues. Beluga whales can sense the Earth's magnetic field to assist with orientation during migration. In contrast, pit vipers like rattlesnakes and bamboo vipers possess pit organs located between their eyes and nostrils. These are highly sensitive thermoreceptors that detect infrared radiation, heat, from endothermic prey at distances of up to 2 meters. The planarian flatworm demonstrates one of the simplest forms of light detection through structures called ocelli, or eye spots. These consist of pigment cells and sensory cells that detect light intensity and direction. This diagram highlights how complex eyes have evolved separately in different lineages. Insects possess compound eyes made of many individual lenses and retinular cells. Mollusks like squids and chordates like frogs both have single-lens eyes with a retina and optic nerve. Although they appear superficially similar, these structures differ greatly in their internal anatomy and evolved independently from simpler light-detecting ancestors. Insects often have sensory organs in unexpected locations. A cricket has its ears on its front legs, where a tympanic membrane vibrates in response to sound waves, stimulating internal mechanoreceptors. Many insects, such as the blowfly, taste with their feet. Their feet are covered in sensory hairs containing chemoreceptors that detect different food molecules, triggering the fly to extend its proboscis to feed once it steps on a food source. At this point, let us explore thermoregulation, which is an animal's ability to maintain its internal temperature within a tolerable range by balancing heat gain and loss. Animals have evolved diverse adaptations to manage these heat exchange processes. First, form or anatomy. Emperor penguins possess a thick, insulating layer of fat, or blubber. This anatomical structure serves as a barrier that significantly reduces heat loss from the body core to the frigid external environment. Second, function or physiology. To actively generate warmth, penguins utilize shivering. This physiological process involves rapid cycles of muscle contraction and relaxation, which produces heat at a cellular level to counteract the cold. Third, behavior. Social behavior is a critical component of their survival. Emperor penguins pack together in massive huddles of up to several thousand individuals. By doing so, they greatly reduce their collective exposure to wind and cold, minimizing heat loss via convection. Thermoregulation ultimately involves controlling 4 physical processes of heat exchange. Radiation is the emission of electromagnetic waves by all objects warmer than absolute zero. The lizard absorbs heat from the electromagnetic waves emitted by the distant sun, while simultaneously radiating a smaller amount of its own energy into the surrounding air. Evaporation is the removal of heat from a surface as liquid turns to gas. When liquid water on the lizard's moist surfaces, such as its mouth, turns into gas and is lost to the environment, it creates a significant cooling effect. Convection is the transfer of heat by the movement of air or liquid past a surface. This process occurs as a breeze moves air past the lizard's dry skin, carrying heat away from the body. Conduction is the direct transfer of heat between objects in contact. When the lizard sits on a hot rock, heat is directly transferred from the warmer surface of the rock to the lizard's body through physical contact. Animals have evolved diverse adaptations to manage these heat exchange processes. Some insects, like the sphinx moth, shiver their thoracic muscles to warm up before flight. Dragonflies may orient their bodies away from the sun to minimize solar radiation. Animals use different strategies to manage their internal state relative to their surroundings. Regulators versus conformers. A temperature regulator, like a river otter, keeps its internal temperature stable despite environmental changes, whereas a temperature conformer, like a largemouth bass, allows its internal temperature to match the environment. Endotherms versus ectotherms. Endotherms, like birds and mammals, generate most of their body heat through internal metabolism. Ectotherms, such as invertebrates, fishes, amphibians, and non-avian reptiles, rely primarily on heat from the external environment. In humans, the hypothalamus acts as a biological thermostat to maintain a normal body temperature of approximately 36 to 38 degrees Celsius. When body temperature increases, the hypothalamus activates cooling mechanisms, such as dilating blood vessels in the skin to radiate heat and triggering sweat glands for evaporative cooling. When body temperature decreases, it activates warming mechanisms, such as constricting blood vessels to keep heat in deeper tissues and triggering shivering to generate heat. Japanese macaques, snow monkeys, are shown huddling together in a cold environment. Their thick fur provides insulation, reducing heat loss, while huddling behavior helps conserve body warmth by sharing heat. These are examples of structural adaptations, fur, and behavioral adaptations, huddling, that help animals survive cold temperatures. The dog cools down mainly through panting, which releases excess heat as water evaporates from the tongue and respiratory tract. The human cools down through sweating, where evaporation of sweat from the skin removes heat from the body. Additionally, the human has used a behavioral adaptation by removing excess clothing to reduce heat retention. To answer this lesson's essential question, plants and animals use specialized receptors and signaling pathways to sense changes in their environment and generate appropriate responses. These abilities are essential because they allow organisms to avoid danger, obtain resources, and adapt to shifting conditions. To conclude, name one sensory receptor and its stimulus, describe how living systems respond to their environment, and compare nervous and hormonal control. Thank you for listening.